Daddy, stay. I never thought the first words my sons ever spoke would be the words that broke my entire life. I remember their tiny voices trembling. I remember their small fingers pulling weakly on Rajan's trousers. And I remember how he looked down at them, not with love, not even with surprise. Just disgust. They were 3 years old that day. 3 years, and they had never said a single word. Not a sound. Not a syllable. Until that moment. I was standing behind them, frozen, watching everything collapse. Rajan didn't even turn fully. He just paused by the door, his suitcase in his hand. His face twisted, like the sound of their voices was something unbearable. Something shameful. And then he kept walking. He stepped right over the small birthday balloons I blew up alone the night before, without saying goodbye, without patting their heads, without hugging them, without looking at me. When the door slammed shut behind him, both boys started crying. And I did too. My name is Naori. I am their papa. And that day was supposed to be a celebration. Their 3rd birthday. Their 3rd year of surviving this cruel world that sees autistic kids as disease. Instead, it became the day their father abandoned us completely. I fell to my knees immediately and hugged them both tightly. They were shaking, terrified. One buried his face in my chest. The other reached his little hand out toward the door like he was still waiting, like he expected Rajan to return. But he didn't. I felt my heart tear, piece by piece, and there was nothing I could do to stop the bleeding. When I met Rajan, everything was different. Back then, I believed he saved me. But now when I think back, maybe that day was the beginning of my tragedy. Before I met him, my life was very small. I worked in streets, cleaning, carrying heavy trash bags, repairing gutters, washing public toilets. Any dirty job I could get paid for, I did. I wanted to survive. That was all. I slept in a broken rented room with no electricity. I cooked noodle water on a small stove. I saved every coin I could. I thought that was what life was. Loneliness, hunger, exhaustion. Then one morning I was given a chance. A job offer. A very wealthy family needed a gardener. Someone to take care of their estate, their plants, their grounds. They said the pay would be enough to live comfortably. I accepted immediately. I arrived at the mansion gates with only 2 shirts, a toothbrush, and a pair of shoes that already had holes on both sides. That was the first time I saw Rajan. Tall, handsome, composed. The kind of beauty people admire and fear at the same time. The way his eyes looked at me that morning. I still remember. Curious. Cold. Sharp. He spoke only 2 words to me. Don't disappoint. I promised I wouldn't. For weeks, I worked silently in the gardens. Pruning roses. Watering trees. Cutting the grass. I tried not to be noticed. I tried to stay small. But Rajan began approaching me. First, it was small things. A glass of cold tea on hot days. Short discussions on the plants. Asking how I was sleeping. Then he started waiting outside every morning just to greet me. Then we began talking more. And more. And more. His voice was so warm then. His smile was gentle. He asked about my dreams. I told him I wanted a home. A family. A place I belonged. He said he admired that. Sometimes we would sit under the sakura trees by the fountain and watch the petals fall. He said I made him feel alive. He said he felt peace with me. He said he loved me. And like a fool, I believed him. When the family found out, everything turned violent. They screamed. They accused. They threatened. They called me dirty, poor, clinging, a gold digger, trash. They fired me immediately. People online started attacking Rajan for choosing someone low class. They insulted me. They posted pictures of me working, covered in sweat, in dirty clothes. They called me a stain on the family. I cried every night alone. Rajan tried to calm me. He said the world hated what they didn't understand. He said love was enough. He said we would run away. And we did. We left that mansion at dawn and never returned. I thought that was the happiest day of my life. We married quietly in a small office with barely anyone watching. When we got our apartment, Rajan took my hands and said, "You will never struggle again." He told me I didn't have to work anymore. He told me he would provide. He told me to stay home and rest. He promised to protect me. And for a long time, he kept that promise. We wanted a family. We tried everything. Every night. Every month. Every hope. But every test was negative. I became depressed and hated my life every single day. I blamed myself quietly. In my heart. Raijen always smiled and told me, "It's not your fault, Naori. We'll find a way." Until the doctor said it was my body that failed. And suddenly I felt like a burden. A broken thing. I saw the disappointment in Raijen's eyes, even when he tried to hide it. Then the IVF started. Once. Twice. 3 times. 4. 5. 6. 7. 8. 9. 10. Each failure felt like losing a child I never met. I watched Raijen get more distant. More frustrated. More exhausted. I tried to hide how much I cried. I didn't want him to see me weak. Then the 11th one worked. I remember I fell to my knees in the hospital hallway, holding my stomach. We finally did it. We created life. We did it together. And Raijen hugged me so tight I couldn't breathe. He said, "Thank you. Thank you, Naori." That night, we cried in each other's arms. We found out it was twins. Twin boys. We held hands in the ultrasound room, staring at the fuzzy shapes on the screen. They were so small. So perfect. I thought everything was going to be okay. I thought the worst was behind us. I thought we finally reached happiness. I was wrong. So wrong. When the doctor said the twins showed signs of autism, my heart stopped. I didn't understand. I didn't know how serious it was. But Raijen, his body froze completely. His hands dropped from mine. His eyes turned dark. He walked out without saying a word. He left me alone. In that cold room. With the doctor. With fear swallowing me whole. I chased him home. When I asked why he left me behind, he threw a flower vase to the floor, shattering it. He screamed that nothing good ever came from me. He called our unborn children a mistake and useless. He said autistic children were a life sentence, a burden to live with. He said he wasted years believing in me. And then, he hit me. I remember the pain more in my heart than in my skin. After that day, nothing was the same. He stopped touching me. Stopped speaking kindly. Stopped caring. He stopped giving me money. I had to find work while pregnant. While tired. While terrified. Raijen started sleeping with other people. Sometimes in our bed. Sometimes bringing them home. And I stood silently in the hallway, listening to strangers laugh at me. Calling me weak. Calling me useless. Calling me pathetic. I pretended I couldn't hear them. I pretended it didn't destroy me. Because I had to protect the lives inside me. When the twins were born, I was alone. Completely alone. No help. Only the nurses and doctors said congratulations to me. I was alone, but with my kids. They couldn't breathe properly, so they stayed in incubators for weeks. When I finally brought them home, I waited for Raijen to hold them. To touch them. To see them. He said they weren't his. He said he will never play the role of a daddy to them. After everything, he looked into their newborn eyes. And rejected them. Years passed like that. Silence. Coldness. Distance. Pain. I raised them alone. He traveled and disappeared for months. He called them useless. He called me worthless. He said we ruined his life. And I believed him. Some days, I didn't want to wake up. But I had to. For them. Only for them. And then today, on their 3rd birthday, he left for good. The twins spoke for the first time. Just to beg him not to leave. And he still walked away. When I finally managed to stand up, I looked down at my sons. Their faces were wet with tears. Mine was too. I picked both of them up in my arms, hugging them as tightly as I could. "I'm here," I whispered. "I'm not going anywhere. I promise." Their little hands clung to my shirt. I rocked them until they stopped shaking. When I looked toward the door, the divorce papers were still sitting on the table. Waiting for me. Waiting to end everything. I never imagined love would destroy me like this. I never imagined parenthood would come with so much pain and difficulties. I never imagined I would be raising 2 autistic boys alone. But the truth is, this is only the beginning. Because I still don't know how we are going to survive tomorrow. How I'm going to provide for their needs, or use what they want at a time. Or the next day. Or the day after that. And I didn't know yet. I sat on the floor of my silent apartment, holding my children, staring at the door Raijen disappeared through, wondering, what happens to us now? The hours after Raijen walked out were the longest of my life. I hated every second that passed by. My kids being autistic was the hardest punishment life has given me. I sat on the living room floor like a lost soul long after the boys fell asleep in my arms. I didn't move. I didn't blink much. I just stared at the door. The same door he left through. trying to understand how love could rot like that, how a promise could become poison, how someone could look at his own children and feel nothing. Maybe I was stupid to hope for different. Maybe the signs were always there. Maybe I didn't want to see them. Because the truth is, I loved him more than myself. And now I was alone. Completely alone. When the boys finally calmed enough for me to carry them, I put them to bed. They curled into each other like frightened animals. Their faces were still wet with tears, even in sleep. I touched their cheeks gently. "I'm here," I whispered again. "I promise I'm here." My voice cracked. My heart felt bruised. My soul felt hollow. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? I just sat in the darkness of our small apartment, listening to their breathing through the thin walls. I thought about all the times Raijen told me I was useless. All the times I stayed quiet to avoid a fight. All the times I believed I deserved it. I thought about leaving. Not the house. Life. I thought about how easy it would be to just stop. Stop trying. Stop fighting. Stop enduring. Maybe everyone would be happier. Maybe the world would be quieter. But then I remembered. My sons. They needed me. Even if they couldn't speak. Even if they couldn't say what they felt. Even if the world called them broken. They were mine. And I couldn't abandon them. Not like he did. The next morning, I found the fridge nearly empty. Just eggs, milk, and half a loaf of bread going stale. We needed food. We needed money. I needed something I didn't have anymore. Strength. I dressed the boys slowly. One of them kept trying to go back to bed. The other stared toward the door again, waiting. It broke me, but I forced myself to smile and clapped my hands softly to get their attention. "Let's go outside today," I said brightly. It hurt to pretend to be cheerful, but their eyes lifted a little, and I guess that was enough. People stared at us on the street. Two identical boys holding my hands, walking slowly, looking confused, twitching and flapping occasionally when overwhelmed. I saw the pity in their eyes. I saw the whispers. I felt like dirt again. Memories of my old life rushed back. The shame. The humiliation. Being shoved. Being laughed at. Being looked down on. But I held their hands tighter. And I kept walking. For the next week, I applied for jobs. Everywhere. Markets. Small shops. Construction. Cleaning services. Most places refused immediately. Some said they didn't hire someone like me. Some laughed when they heard I have autistic kids. Some said I looked too weak and useless. Some said I looked too tired. They were right. I was tired. Inside and outside. Eventually, a small cafe offered part-time afternoon cleaning. Just enough money to pay for food. But not therapy. Never therapy. That was still impossible. The boys barely ate. They barely slept. They cried at night, waking up terrified. Sometimes both at once. Sometimes one after the other. Sometimes I cried with them. It was draining, both mentally and physically. Some days I felt like I was going mad. Sometimes I cried quietly in the bathroom so they wouldn't see. I thought things couldn't get worse. But I was wrong. One morning, the boys woke up screaming. Not crying. Screaming. Like they were in pain. Or scared. Or both. They wouldn't stop. They wouldn't breathe properly. Their bodies shook and jerked. I didn't know what to do. I had no idea what was happening. They clung to me like they were drowning. I didn't know whether to scream or collapse. So instead, I stood silently, breaking quietly. I took them outside and sat with them on the curb, rocking them until they could breathe. I promised myself I would learn. I would understand them, no matter what it took. I stayed awake until dawn again, just sitting there, holding my boys, thinking, quiet, empty, until I realized something terrifying. I no longer knew who I was. Not without him. Not without love. Not without the dream I built and lost. I was a shadow of myself. A ghost in my own life. A body filled with sorrow. And yet, my sons still slept peacefully against my chest. As if I mattered. As if I was enough. And maybe that was the beginning of something. Healing. Or madness. I wasn't sure. The next morning, I made a decision. A painful one. A frightening one. A necessary one. I packed small lunch boxes. I held both boys' hands. And for the first time since they were born, I took them somewhere new. Somewhere they'd never been. A public playground. Grass. Sand. Slides. Swings. A world beyond our pain. I didn't know if it would help. I didn't know if they would understand. But we needed to breathe. I needed to breathe. I sat them carefully on the swing seats, even if they didn't know how to move. I pushed them slowly, gently, softly, and for a small moment, just a moment, their eyes lit up, just a little, and I felt something loosen inside me, like a tight knot slowly unraveling. And I thought, maybe we're not finished yet. Maybe there's still something left for us. Somewhere, someone, some new beginning. And then, as I was pushing them, I heard a voice behind me, deep, calm, warm. "Excuse me, are you all right?" I turned and saw him, the man who would change everything. Renzo, standing there quietly, with a little girl holding his hand, looking at me with gentle eyes I hadn't seen in years. And before I could answer, my sons began to cry, terrified, exhausted, lost. I opened my mouth to speak, but nothing came out. Nothing, because I didn't know how to ask for help anymore. I didn't even know how to hope. And then the little girl stepped forward, looked at my sons, and smiled. "Don't cry," she whispered softly. "They're safe. We're here." Her voice was tiny, but something inside me shattered, and I fell to my knees, crying, in front of strangers, unable to hold myself together anymore. Her words cracked something open inside me. I hadn't cried like that in years. Not loudly, not helplessly, not in public. After meeting Renzo at the playground, the days didn't magically get easier. My sons still struggled. They still woke up crying at night. They still panicked around new people. I still felt exhausted every single morning. I still woke up afraid of the future. But something had changed. Something shifted quietly, like a small candle lit in a long dark tunnel. For once in years, I was not entirely alone. Renzo didn't force his way into our lives. He flowed into them, gently, softly, naturally, like rain finding dry earth. At first, he only appeared at the playground to greet us. Then he stayed longer. Sometimes he brought juice boxes for the boys. Sometimes he brought warm bread from a bakery near his house. Sometimes he brought nothing except a warm smile and quiet conversation. And honestly, that alone was enough to stop me from falling apart. At night, after the boys slept, I sometimes sat on the living room floor remembering the way Raijen left. The sound of the door, the silence after, the pain. But I didn't break apart the way I used to. Now, those memories didn't crush me completely. Instead, I would remember the way Renzo spoke. Calm, gentle, patient, like healing. I would remember his daughter's smile, so full of innocence and compassion. And I realized, maybe the world wasn't all broken. Maybe the world still had some light, even if I had forgotten that for years. One afternoon, while the boys were playing quietly in the sand, I was sitting with Renzo on the bench, watching them. He suddenly asked, "Do you want to come over for dinner sometime?" I panicked. Immediately. My chest clenched. My stomach twisted. I was embarrassed. I didn't want them to see how poor we were. I didn't want anyone thinking we were beggars. But Renzo just smiled gently. "No pressure. If you'd like." And what surprised me most is that he didn't push. He waited, silently, patiently, like he understood what fear looks like. Because maybe he did. His partner had died years ago. He told me quietly one evening. Cancer. He raised his daughter alone since she was 2. He knew loneliness too. Real loneliness. And yet he still smiled, like the world hadn't defeated him. Eventually, we accepted the dinner invitation. I dressed the boys nicely. Well, as nicely as I could. Clothes we'd used for birthdays only. I combed their hair carefully. They looked nervous. I looked terrified. But when Renzo opened the door, he didn't look surprised. Or judgmental. Or pitying. He simply smiled warmly. "Welcome." His daughter took my son's hands without hesitation. They watched cartoons together in the living room, while Renzo and I set the table in the kitchen. He cooked everything himself. Vegetables, soup, fish, rice, soft bread. It smelled like home, the one I had always wanted but never had. And when we sat to eat, when I saw my sons chewing slowly, their eyes curious and bright, I felt something inside me break again. But this time, it wasn't sadness. It was gratitude, hope, peace. For the first time in my life, my children felt safe in someone else's home. And that meant more than words can ever express. Weeks passed. Renzo taught me things I never learned before. How to calm the boys during sensory overload. How to create structure in daily routine. How to teach communication gently. how to use picture cards, how to help them understand instructions, how to celebrate small progress. He found free support groups for parents of autistic children. He printed articles about autism acceptance. He highlighted parts that might help. He walked with us to therapy centers, even though we couldn't afford them yet, just so I could understand what options existed. Not once did he make me feel stupid. Not once did he make me feel like a failure. He always said, "You're doing your best, Naori, and that is more than enough." And slowly, my fear softened. My shame faded. My sons began smiling more, laughing sometimes. One of them started humming. The other started pointing to things he liked. I celebrated every small victory, every smile, every sound, every breath, because those small moments were miracles, real miracles. When the divorce papers finally went through, I expected to crumble, to fall apart, to break permanently. Instead, I felt relief, freedom, peace. I walked out of the courthouse holding both my sons' hands. I looked at the sky. I whispered, "We survived." It wasn't the ending I once dreamed of. Oh no, it was something better. A new beginning. Choosing strength. I got a better job. Still not glamorous. Still not perfect. But enough. Enough to provide food. Enough to keep the apartment. Enough to buy clothes. Enough to save small amounts every month. Every paycheck felt like victory. Every meal I placed on the table felt like triumph. Some nights were still hard. Some nights, I still cried quietly in the bathroom. Some days, I still worried endlessly about the future. But I kept going. For them. My sons. My light. My reason. 6 months after Raijen left, my sons said their second sentence. We were sitting in Renzo's living room. The little girl was drawing. Renzo was cooking. The boys were stacking blocks. Suddenly, one of them looked up at me with bright eyes and said, "Papa, look." Just 2 words. Simple words. But I burst into tears immediately. Renzo rushed over, thinking something bad happened. But when he saw my face, he understood instantly. They were speaking more, communicating more, connecting more. Not because of me alone. Not because of therapy alone. But because they felt safe. Because they were loved. Because they were alive. I hugged them both. And I cried openly without shame. Renzo placed his hand gently on my shoulder. And in that moment, I realized something. Healing doesn't happen loudly. It happens slowly, gently, quietly, in small steps, one breath at a time. I didn't fall in love with Renzo quickly. Oh no, I was too afraid, too wounded, too scarred. I kept pushing the feeling away. I told myself, don't love again, don't trust again, don't hope again. But love is a strange thing. It grows where you least expect it. It blooms in broken hearts. It finds cracks and pours light into them. One evening after dinner, I thanked him for everything he's doing for us. He smiled softly and said, "You deserve happiness, Naori." My heart trembled. I didn't know I needed to hear those words. I didn't know how starved I was for kindness. I didn't know how long I had lived believing I deserved nothing. And somewhere between fear and gratitude, I realized I loved him, not because he rescued me, not because he helped me, but because he respected me, because he saw me, because he treated my children with love. Slowly, I allowed myself to love again. And he did too. Gently, patiently, softly, like sunrise warming cold skin. We married quietly, just like I did with Raijen. But this time, it wasn't rushed. It wasn't desperate. It wasn't painful. We stood in a small room. Just us. His daughter. My boys. The boys held my hands. His daughter held his. We exchanged simple vows. Not poetic. Not fancy. Just honest. He promised. To stand with you, to hold you up, to lift your sons as my own. I promised. To try. Every day. Even when life is heavy. We signed the papers. We took family photos together. And when we walked out, I felt like I had walked out of darkness and into light. A home. We moved into a small house together. Not a mansion. Not a luxury apartment. A simple home. Warm. Bright. Safe. There was a garden in the back. The boys loved running through it. We planted cherry blossoms together. For memories. For healing. For new beginnings. Some nights, we sat on the porch, watching the children play, holding each other's hands. Not speaking. Just breathing. Together. And every time I looked at my sons, smiling, laughing, learning, I felt myself healing, piece by piece, breath by breath, day by day. And now, my sons are 5 years old. They can speak short sentences now. They can say when they're hungry, when they're scared, when they want to play. They laugh loudly. They love deeply. They sleep peacefully. They are safe. And I am too. They have a father who stayed, a sister who loves them, a home that protects them, and a future growing brighter every day. Sometimes, when the night is quiet and everyone is asleep, I sit in the living room, and I thank the universe for the pain, because without it, I would never have found this life, this peace, this family, this love. I thought autism was punishment, but I was wrong. Autism is their strength, their uniqueness, their light. They are not broken. They are not shameful. They are not problems. They are miracles, just slower ones, and I am honored to love them. If someone asked me now, what was the hardest day of your life? Asterisk, asterisk. I would say, the day Rygen abandoned us. But if they asked, what was the best day of your life? I would say, the day I learned we could survive without him. Because only by losing everything did I learn how much we truly had. Love, strength, family, hope. My sons saved me. Renzo healed me. And I woke up, alive again. Today is my favorite day, because we are here, together, breathing, growing, healing. And I am happy, truly happy, at last.